you so much for welcoming me and just creating a space and for me to share my story. It means a lot to me, and thank you so much. When Sophia reached out to me to talk about, when she told me about the theme, I got really excited because Boston is really ingrained in me. It's really shaped who I am as a person. And I feel like the Boston that I connect with and I root with is a part of Boston that a lot of people don't know about. You see Boston on TV and you think we talk a certain, well, if you're not from Boston, they think we talk a certain way, but there's nooks and crannies of Boston that people don't really know. There's a lot of culture, there's a lot of personality, there's a lot of movement, and I'm proud to say it. I don't know if you all read my bio, but my name is Michelle Thomas. I am born and raised in Boston, a proud single mommy of 2 boys. I work in education. I've been working in higher ed and working with students for probably over 20 years. I started when I was 5. But I've been in education, just helping to, like, in my mind, just shape the minds of young people and really trying to ingrain in them that they can reach for the stars and that there are no boxes, there are no ceilings. And I'll talk more about that. But I just wanted to, before I started telling my story, I wanted to do a little housekeeping. I feel like this is just an obligatory mommy slide. This has nothing to do with anything other than me being a proud mom. So I just was like, let me get this out the way. These are my 2 boys, VJ and Nabi. VJ is 6, yeah. Nabi is 13. He actually helped me prepare. He's in the debate team, and he really was giving it to me last night. Like, make sure you engage with the crowd, Mom. You're talking too fast. I'm like, okay, I'll make you proud. So anyway, I just wanted to do a housekeeping, get this out the way before we start. But I felt like in order for me to really, truly convey how deeply rooted I am to Boston and how much it shaped me as a person, I had to start with the stories of my matriarchal line. Because I feel like even though my father is also from Boston, my matriarchal line on my mother's story, on my mother's side, really shows the story of how I became where the seed was planted and how I became rooted in Boston. So this woman right here, to my right, is my grandmother, and the one to the left is my mother. So my grandmother, Betty Williams, we call her Mummy. She's now an ancestor. Her story is it's really interesting, and it also lays the foundation, as I said, to how I ended up being rooted here in Boston. My mummy, as we call her, she moved here from Maryland in 1960. She had a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old. She took all 3 kids, all under 3, and got on a train from Maryland and drove and went up to Boston. And she didn't know anybody here. She didn't know anything about Boston. She didn't have any family here. And really just the only thing that was driving her up here was chasing love. She had her youngest daughter, which is now my aunt, who's also an ancestor now. And my grandfather just picked up and moved. So she said, I'm going to be with the man I love. I don't need anything else here. And that's how the story was told to me. She said, there's nothing here in Maryland. My heart's in Boston. So she got on the train and she came up. And she literally left everything behind her. And she, like I said, her heart opened, she headed straight to Boston. When she got here, she saw that things weren't as what she thought it would be, and she ended up homeless with her 3 kids. They stayed in an old shelter, it's called New Chardon. They stayed in a shelter for about a few years and stayed in different places here and there. But she ended up landing with her 3 kids, including my mother, in a housing project in Boston. The housing project back then was called Columbia Point. It was a high-rise, old-school brick housing project that sat right on the coast. It's a waterfront property that sits right on the Dorchester Bay, and that's where she landed. She landed with her 3 girls there. And as I said, she left everything behind her. So much so that after she passed, we're gathering all her documents and we realized that we don't know her real name. Betty is not her real name, and Williams is not her real last name. So she literally recreated a new life right here. She said, I'm going to reroot myself and plant myself here in Boston, and that's just what it is. And she created a whole new identity for herself. So, I mean, this is the name she chose for herself. So that's how we choose to remember her. But we're still in a quest trying to figure out what her actual birth name is. You know, and we had to go. There's a whole process, right? But it just speaks to how the mindset she was in when she ventured here. And when I tell you she never looked back, she never even left Boston. She didn't visit any other states. She never went back home. She never even spoke about her life. Everything that we know about our family in Maryland is what we research as adults now. But she never talked about it. She never talked about her life before Boston. So Boston was her life. So that's the story of Mommy. So this picture here is a picture of the old Columbia Point. The beginning slide that you all saw was also an aerial view of how Columbia Point looked. It was an insular community. There was literally one entrance in and one entrance out. So the only reason you would be there is if you lived there. Police didn't come there. Ambulance really didn't come unless it was an emergency, and it was its own community. And then because it was off the coast of the Dorchester Bay, there's a beach right along the property. And a little bit about Mommy, she was a very creative woman. She was very connected to the land. She had a lot of respect for nature. She drew. She did oil painting. She had beautiful handwriting. She would create projects out of old popsicle sticks. She was just very creative. And she was also into foraging, which, you know, back then was into, people saw her as like she was losing her mind. She would go off to the beach, gather like seaweed and sea moss and make healing oils and potions. And they were also, she was also what some people would call a seer. She was very energetically in tune. She would call and say, I had a dream about fish. And then if she called us and said she had a dream about fish, we're all looking around like, who's pregnant? Not me. We'll all be like, lo and behold, it was true. Like, she was just so connected to her grandkids and her children, and she spoke to us through her dreams. And we all connect with each other through dreams. I will call my brother or my mother to this day and we'll be like, did you dream about this? And yes, lo and behold, like, yes, I had a dream similar. And we all say that it's Mommy speaking through us and communicating through us. So that's the story of my grandmother. My mother, Stephanie. Stephanie is a special woman. I love her dearly. I love her. She's Sophia knows. She knows my mother very well, but she is. She grew up in Columbia Point, the old Columbia Point. And she was a young mother. She had my oldest sister at 16 years old. And by her mid-20s, she had three children. My mother has this unquenchable thirst for knowledge that it always amazes me. And I think this was Mommy's way, my grandmother's way of passing on her creativity to my mother. Because my mother's creativity manifests itself through learning. And then sharing her knowledge, right? So the story of my mother, so she wasn't born in Boston, but she was uprooted with her mother from Maryland. She was a young teen mom, single mom. She was on welfare, on public assistance. She took in the 70s and 80s, they had typing programs. She took a typing class, passed that and got her certificate. After that, she went and got her GED, passed her GET and got that. And then she went to UMass Boston, got her bachelor's degree. And then after that, she said she went and got her master's from UMass Boston. And if that is not enough, she went and got an MBA from Fitchburg State. And she's still looking for certificate programs and things that she can do and certifications that she can take. So it just shows her, like, as I said, her thirst for knowledge. And I really think that comes from our grandmother, her mother, my grandmother, her mother. And that quest for knowledge, and also to know herself. Also speaking to her curiosity and her thirst for knowledge, up until I was around 6 years old, we thought that Mommy, my mother, and my aunts were all we had in Boston. We had no background here other than us. And my mother was hearing through the grapevine, like, your father has kids in Boston. You know, there's other kids here. So my mother's just gathering information, and she starts doing research. So back in the day, I don't know if you all are familiar, there were yellow books, yellow pages. There's big books, which probably, I don't know for privacy reasons, that probably wouldn't fly today, but there was these big yellow books that had everybody who was a registered person in Boston, had their name, their address, and their home phone number listed by last name. So she just started going through the yellow pages and finding people that she said, this name sounds familiar, and just started calling people. So in her research, not only did she find one, not two, but 3 brothers, just from the yellow pages doing research that she had here in Boston. And we connected, so our family, even though, like I said, we ended up rooting here in Boston, our branches started spreading in Boston. So we went from just thinking it was just us in Columbia Point to now we have uncles and cousins and all this extended family in Boston that we didn't know. And that's just based off of my mother's curiosity and her research and her knowing that and feeling in her soul that there was something bigger than us here in Boston. And then she's still researching. She's gone and she did the DNA and gone on Ancestry to find our ancestors. And in doing that, she found she has another sister. We just met another aunt 2 years ago that was here in Boston the whole time. So we were all living parallel lives and thinking that we were all here alone. But you know, like I said, our branches were here. And so we have a new aunt and new cousins and things like that. And we welcome them, you know, because we're all family. And so she's still doing that research. She's able to, we've gone back about 6 generations. And of course, you know, with the complicated but beautiful history of Black Americans and Black Americans, is once we hit slavery, there's no records of some of our ancestors, but she's going to keep going. And so that's the story of my mother. So now going to me, and so before I talk about myself, I just felt like I had to lay that foundation to show how deeply rooted and how Boston has, it really is part of who I am. It shapes me as a person. But I feel like if those seeds weren't planted by the matriarchs in my family, I probably would not be who I am today. So for me, I also grew up in, well, it's now called Harbor Point, but I grew up in Columbia Point, and it's a special community. It's a part of Boston that I think a lot of people don't know. The project, like, it's project living. So there was, again, one way in and one way out, but we were an insulated family. There was a market out there, there was a beach out there, and there was really, if anybody walked in, you could tell if they were outsider, because that's just, we were family. And when I tell you, there was so many creative people. There was young children who drew and who painted and who sang and wrote. There was a group of boys that I grew up with. They would literally go, there was a park inside the community. They would do backflips off of like the structures. They were literally doing gymnast level moves. And I'm like, there was so much energy and movement and creativity in this insulated space, but nobody saw us. We were literally secluded from the rest of Boston. The buses, there were a few buses. There was an 8 and a 16 bus that came out there, but literally the only people who would be on that bus were the ones who lived in that community. I don't know how familiar you all are with Boston, but if you're familiar, UMass Boston and the JFK Museum, it's a small community nestled right behind it. So it was easily forgotten if you weren't from there or if you didn't go there. So I feel like in some ways that all of us kids and all the people who lived in that community were kind of forgotten by the city. And there was, like I said, there was so much creativity and talent, it was just a special place to grow up in. So, and I grew up there. And I feel like I inherited my mother and my grandmother's creativity. I was super dramatic as a kid. I would write these like dramatic poems and, I don't know. I don't know what I was going through. But I was always writing, even the way I dressed and how I expressed myself. I just always felt like I had all this energy that I had to get out. And I was like the little different duckling out in the community, but I was always accepted. Everybody in the community was accepted for who they were, and that was what was so special about where I lived. And so flash forward, I went to schools. So when I tell you Boston runs through my veins, I went to elementary, middle school in Boston, high school at John D. O'Brien, and then I did my undergraduate at Lesley University in Cambridge. And when I tell you I was so insulated in my community, it felt like I was going to another country when I went to Cambridge. Like it was a huge culture shock, and I was just over the bridge in Cambridge. I felt like I'm like, where am I? You know, because growing up in Harbor Point, it was just like everybody looked. I saw people who looked like me. We all were family. And so coming to Cambridge, it was shocking. Now looking back at it, I'm like, I was literally on the same line. I was on the red line, and I still felt like I was in a foreign land. But I went to Lesley, and then I did my master's at BU. So I never left. I stayed here, and I've been working in different universities and organizations here in Boston. So I'm like a true and true Bostonian, but I love it, and especially when I know the story that rooted me here. It makes me feel even more proud to be a Bostonian. I have a company called Dream Without Permission. My company, I started this company because I thought about being a young girl, growing up in Harbor Point, and all the talent that we had collectively, even my mom and my grandmother, in the housing project, and like how, I felt like there was always limits on us. There was always limits on people like us in the city. And like I said, we were like the forgotten people in Boston. And so when I started the company, it's really my goal basically Dream Without Permission, let me back up, is a publishing house. So my goal is to publish books that promote to young people and even the grown-ups who read the books to just not to not feel like you need permission to dream big, or to not feel like you're placed in a box. Because I know how that felt growing up. I know how it felt to have big dreams and think that somebody like me who came from where I come from, that doesn't work. That doesn't work for people like me. So it's really my goal, especially for young kids of color, to make sure that whatever they are passionate about, however they want to express themselves, that they are free to do so, and they can do it with pride. My first two books that I published, My Daughter You Glow and My Son You Shine, is really my way, in some ways, of honoring my ancestors. Especially, I thought a lot about my grandmother, and I always think about her journey, even the 10-hour train ride that she made up with her 3 little babies. I'm like, how did she do that, and so I feel like these books are to honor her and to honor the legacy of all my ancestors, and also to pay homage to the child in me and the children that I grew up around that had so many hopes and dreams, but there was just no one there to tell them that it was okay to feel that way. It was okay. So, how am I doing for time? I'm good. Sorry, I told Sophia to keep me on track, because when I tell you I'm a stage 1 talker, this breakfast can turn into lunch. Before I even get here, I just wanted to talk more about, so when I think of, like I said, being a Boston native, even though my roots are grounded here, I think about, like I said, my grandmother, and I am her future, right? And I wonder if she knew that she was making an ultimate sacrifice. My grandmother and my mother's story, they went through so much hardship that I wonder if they knew what they were setting me up for. Like, I wonder if it was in their plan, or if they if they could even fathom. Because I think about how a life for all of us in Maryland would be, and with the conditions that my grandmother was living in. The opportunities that I've had here in Boston probably would have looked very different. So I always say that everything I do is going to be in honor of the sacrifices that my ancestors have made. And so to bring it full circle, even though, like I said, I am very deeply rooted here in Boston, but my goal with whatever work I do is to like my mother, finding uncles and aunts and doing research on our history, is to reach my branches out across the diaspora. This organization here, the Agozi Shalom Village, they go out to Rwanda every year, and they sponsor different families and young people. So a lot of the young people that were victims of the genocide are now young adults now. So they go out and they help them, they give medical supplies. And even though, so the first 2 books that I published, it's emerging reading level. But I'm like, what better for them to learn, to read, than to see, you know, images of themselves. And the images in the book are very intentional because I want, it shows pride and the beauty in all the shades of being black and brown. So this is just, it's just one of the goals of my company, is to, like I said, stretch my branches out and reach the diaspora and make sure that, I don't know, that the book, that they show, that they show the pride. And they show the pride of who we are untouched. And when I say like the pride of who we are untouched, just thinking about me as a young girl in Columbia Point, like if racism wasn't a thing, if stereotypes wasn't a thing, like if we were untouched talent in Columbia Point, how would that look? And so I try to convey that in the books. How would a child who is unboxed, no ceilings, how would that look? And how would it look to them if they're viewing it themselves? So yes, so that it comes full circle for me, and this is really part of the goal. And so, I mean, and that really concludes it. I just, I felt it was important to tell my grandmother's story because in my mind, every time you speak an ancestor's name, it keeps their spirit alive. You know, it keeps them, it's almost like it keeps them here present to speak their name. And so even though in the books I don't say my ancestor's name, I want to make sure that their essence is felt. So I just really thank you all for holding space for me and allowing me to say my grandmother's name and to speak about it and to share the story. So thank you so much.